Hey guys. Hey guys. I hope you're doing well today. Thanks for joining me. This video is for those of you who are in a season of your life where you're just frustrated. Maybe you have a teacher who just constantly feels like that teacher is just riding you and you just don't understand what the problem is. Maybe you have a job and you just have a supervisor who just seems like whatever you do, they always have an issue. There's always something that it feels like it's just not right. And you struggle maybe to communicate with them. Like the list could just go on and on. Like you're at the point that you're ready to switch classes. You're ready to switch, jobs. You're ready to leave. But the Lord hasn't told you to leave yet. Or maybe you're frustrated, but the Lord hasn't told you to quit that job. Maybe you're frustrated, but you're trying to leave a job, but you don't have another source of income. So now you're really feeling stuck. I want to talk to you today. I've been there. Now, it's not easy. When we find ourselves in places where it becomes quite evident, this is what the Lord wants for this season of my life. For whatever reason, He is not moving me. And I do not know why. This is a real delicate time. This is a time for some real self-examination, some introspection. So one thing that I want to share, because I had a moment like this. I had a supervisor who actually, before she became my supervisor, I thought we really had a good working relationship. I went to this job excited to learn new things, excited for the supervisor, ready to go forth. And it just went downhill almost immediately. It got to the point where when me and my supervisor would talk, I just felt aggravated. Like, I'm not generally a confrontational person. I'm not a person to go from 0 to 10. But in this situation, it just was one of those things where I just felt it was better to distance myself in some seasons, because I was just starting to feel explosive and I had too much to lose. I had been at this job for too many years to be exploding and messing up my good reputation and getting myself in a position of getting fired and now not having a source of income. So I had to figure some things out. I just want to share with you all today what I did. Number 1, pray and share your challenges with someone who is interceding on your behalf. Partner with someone who supports you and who loves you enough to agree with you in prayer. Pray. Seek God for guidance, wisdom, and instruction on how to get through this season. Pray. Number 2, another thing that I did, I talked to someone who I respected, who had experience as a supervisor. And without giving any details to let her know who the person was who I was having trouble with, I just began to explain the situation to perhaps get an objective perspective on what I could do to help improve the situation. Another thing I did, this is kind of hard. I started listening to what my supervisor was saying, because at times I did not like how it was being said. I started tuning out. So I had to listen to what was being said. I'll give you an example. Many times my supervisor would say to me, "Did you think or stop before you came to ask me this question? Did you go to anybody else to get the answer before you came to me. In past experiences, I had good relationships with my supervisors, so that was never an issue. My supervisors always had open door policies. So I was able to brainstorm with them, and it was a different setting. But in this setting, that wasn't the relationship and the rapport that I had with my new supervisor. So I had to examine myself. Had I taken the time to try to find the answer for myself? When I got real honest, many times the answer was no. Had I tried to find someone else who could help me with the answer, many times the answer was no. So here's what I had to do. First, I had to stop trying to make my new supervisor act like my old supervisor. This was a different person. This was a different setting. In my old setting, it was more relaxed. It was more laid back. My new setting was more fast-paced. It was a support capacity that I was now functioning in. We had to get answers to our customers quickly, and the delays were often considered unacceptable. So when I did not come with a solution, when I was not solution focused, in approaching my supervisor, I just became another problem that she had to solve. To start listening more. I listened to the names of the people who were floating around the office who were considered subject matter experts on any area. I began to note the names of those people. I had to start evaluating what the problem was, and then thinking about what I thought the solution would be. And where I saw gaps or areas that I could not answer, I had to start developing questions to go to those subject matter experts and ask for their assistance and input. And if necessary, also develop follow-on questions just in case it was necessary for me to get additional information. In other words, I had to be prepared, because I didn't want to become a burden to those new resources. As I began to implement these new steps, I started noticing how busy my supervisor was. I started noticing how much time it took to look up the information that many times I was just dumping on her as another problem. My supervisor was often being asked for assistance through cell phone, instant messaging, and email, as well as people coming to her in person. She had 4 different ways that people were approaching her. And again, I was just another problem that needed to be fixed. As I began to see my supervisor as a person, and no longer through the eyes of my hurt, I decided that I wanted to be more solution focused. I wanted to be a source of help for her, instead of assuming that she should be the one to always help me. Over time, because I was now listening and implementing the information that I gathered from listening to my supervisor, I became more solution oriented. I started looking for solutions and answers to problems. And my supervisor became the last person who I went to. And when I did approach her with a problem, I was then able to go to her with solutions and options, as well as the names of the resources that I had tapped into so that she would not have to duplicate my effort if it was necessary for her to do any additional research. And where possible and where necessary, I made decisions on my own. After working with that supervisor for about 5 years, I eventually was promoted to another department, to another position. Before I left, I had the opportunity to talk to my supervisor. And she shared with me that at that point, I had become one of her best employees. She also apologized for the way that she treated me early on in my time of being there with her. And I was able to acknowledge my shortcomings and apologize to her also. When I left that position, remember, the Lord had never told me at any point in the 5 years that it was time to leave. And when he told me it was time to leave, I was promoted into a new position. That position was working with the same people who I'd been helping in a support capacity those previous years. The Lord had used my relationships that I developed with all those different people that I had networked with, and now they'd become my co-workers. Had I stayed focused on what I believed to be the problem, had I thought my supervisor was the only problem, I would have remained paralyzed. I would not have been prepared for promotion. So I just want to leave you all with this, and I have a few notes. I'm looking down because I don't want to forget. There are times when we're in situations where the Lord will not give us a way of escape because that is where he wants us in that season. And what I've often found is that when the Lord wants me to be someplace and I fight to get out, I will face the same test in the next place where I go. That's an indication that there's an area of development. There's something that the Lord is wanting to do in us. So it's just best to try to figure out what it is that God is trying to pull out of us. And that's why I highlighted the fact that I prayed. We may not like how it was done. We may not agree with the office politics. But at the end of the day, every situation in our lives is there for us to learn from, particularly when it's a season or an area where the Lord is telling you you can't move. It's best to accept that season for what it is and to learn as much as you can in that season so that you can move forward. One thing I knew about that position was that it was not my destination. That was a temporary situation. So what I needed to do, I needed to learn everything I needed to learn in that situation. I needed to start to identify where I wanted to go and what the requirements were to get there. I needed to start doing whatever trainings or whatever enhancements to my resume. I needed to be prepared so that when the opportunity to leave came, I would be ready. I also needed to be mindful of how I treated people in that season. Oftentimes I find that when people are in situations where they feel tested, our temper can be a little short, our patience can be a little short, but I've tried in every area of my life to remain as respectful as I can in how I deal with people. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've had moments where I've not agreed with people. But what I'm saying is it's so important to be respectful of others because we never know who we're going to encounter and how the Lord may have been seeking to use that person in a different area of our lives. So you may be frustrated today. You may feel like giving up. But I just want to encourage you. Please listen to the steps that I shared. Please try to implement anything that you have not implemented. And if you have implemented everything, the one thing that you need to continue to do is to pray. Pray and fast. Seek the Lord and ask Him what it is that you're missing so that you can get yourself to the place where you need to be, so that you can get out of the place where you don't want to be. I hope this helps. Even in this season, please be encouraged to know God loves you and He created you with a great purpose. And all things are working together for good to those who love God and are the called according to His purpose. Bye-bye.